all and welcome. You're very, very welcome here to our second annual Retina International Virtual Conference. I might just ask everyone to please mute yourself as you enter into this meeting. Due to the nature of this meeting, we have opted for a meeting as opposed to a webinar. This allows us to do breakout rooms and increase the engagement, which is definitely our goal for this entire event. So please do get engaged. We hope you enjoy the many sessions and panels that we have over the next 2 days. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce you now to Ms. Marina Sutter. So Marina is our interim chair of the Retina International Youth Council. And Marina is going to present to us on the Youth Council and provide us with an introduction. Before I do that, I would just like to remind everyone that this event is being recorded and it is also being live streamed via YouTube. Thank you very much. It's just a reminder to please stay muted. If you would like to raise your hand to make any comments through, we invite you to use your keyboard shortcut, Alt-Y, to raise hand. And you can also find this function in the reactions control across the bottom bar. So Marina, I'm going to pass over to you. Marina, you're just on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome to everybody both in the Zoom and listening in on the live stream. As Fiona said, I'm the interim chair of the Youth Council, and it's been a dream. 1 year ago, we talked about founding a council. We talked about getting those officials elected, and today it's a reality. So let's have a look at why do we have a Youth Council? What is its function? And moreover, how can you get involved if you're interested? Next slide, please. So if you're not familiar, Retina International is a patient organization. We have many affiliates around the world, and it's our job to build capacity to help inform policy all around the world. And this means we take a very holistic approach to health. We don't just look at the biology or the dysfunction, we care about the implications. So as you can see on the slide, there is a grid. It's got 4 health domains. First of all, mental. Mental health is becoming more well known. It's about our ability to manage and engage with our resourcing. How do we perceive the world? And then how do we react to the world? A lot of people are not aware that when you live with low vision, you deal with a lot more mental barriers. Things like greater fatigue when reading or certain activities like navigating. And this has very direct implications. This means that we are more prone to getting anxiety. We are more likely to develop depression. Then there is the physical realm. The physical is very well known. This is the biological dysfunction, the eye that does not work, the eye that cannot see. This we know how to deal with through technology. Then there is this third barrier, the third domain of health, which we often talk about and which is becoming more well known. This is social. This is our connection and relationship to the people and systems around us. For example, my social well-being is linked to my mother, my father, my friends, and my colleagues, even the health professionals who serve me. And what we do see, and what we have heard from people, is that during diagnosis and post-diagnosis, that people will isolate themselves, afraid of what is coming or afraid of how to tell those they love that something isn't working and they need more help. This directly feeds into our fourth and most unknown health dimension, spiritual. Now, spirituality has a number of definitions, but in terms of well-being and health, for Retina, the operational definition we're going to be looking at is that spirituality or spiritual well-being is about identity. It's about the value sets that we hold. For example, I believe in good communication. I believe in integrity. And this directly has an effect on how I choose to interact with my systems. The system can be my family, my culture, or my country, to the level of politics even. This is where spiritual comes in play. And I'm very excited because the team has done a great job of including all 4 domains in our presentations over the following 2 days. So stay tuned for the personal panel on day 2. And please be aware that you need to be registered to participate because these will not be recorded sessions. These will not be live streamed. So if you want to have a conversation with our youth council and get to know their lived experience and their tips and tricks, then get registered. Next slide, please. So how do we aim to achieve this? This seems a very lofty goal, but I don't think so. I believe that through the structure that we have developed and the people we have chosen, we will achieve this goal with flying colors. First and foremost, on this slide, there are 2 points of information. One is a table with a hierarchy. And on the other side, we have a list of bullet points, which I will touch on as we go through. On the top of our graph of our hierarchy is the Retina International Board. This is the board which directs and manages our movements. The Youth Council speaks with and interacts with the board. It is our duty to participate in and to help promote events and projects run by Retina International, such as surveys or this council, this youth event. And it's also for the purpose of building capacity, for informing that policy at the national level. And in order to achieve this, the Retina International Board has a lot of say, and they observe. And then we have our next layer down. We are looking at the elected officials. These are nominees from full member countries. They are nominated by the council members. Myself and my colleagues choose those who we think are most capable to carry out the functions needed. We have the chairperson, we have the vice chair, and we have secretary. One layer down, we have the council itself. The council is made up of volunteers, people nominated by their nations because they thought they were capable of carrying out these tasks. At this point in time, we have 8 countries involved. And out of these 8 countries, we have 14 nominees. On our final layer, we have the WG, the working groups. In order to promote the health and well-being of our council members and to ensure long-lasting success, we have decided to have subgroups, working groups, which enables our council members to raise their hand and say, yes, I'm interested in advocacy, or actually, I am quite interested in event management, or even social media. These working groups allow people to follow their passion, offer time when they have it, but also ensure that we are covering all the jobs, the projects that we want to, without causing or costing anybody more than necessary. So this structure not only enables us to reach all our goals and hit all our targets, but it means that we are looking after the health and well-being of everybody involved. Next slide, please. So what have we done so far? Well, in July, we got started. We've had 2 official council meetings. We've had much more working group meetings for this youth conference. And part of that is that we are already starting to plan our future projects. We have some already in the pipeline. For example, the Retina International World Congress. We will be responsible for a youth program that takes place in person. But not only that, we are in the process of electing those 3 individuals, the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. And once we've got that done, it's time for strategy. Not only do we care about the internal workings, we have already started participating in the advocacy realm of our function. We have attended a UN event, which is a UN action for including rare diseases, which is fantastic. And not only because it is advocacy, but it's all about working for future generations, young people like us speaking up for those who come after us. Next slide, please. So the question I have for you is, are you interested? Has anything I said sparked curiosity? Well, the way to get involved is to contact our executive team in Ireland. Through them, you can find out if there is a member organization near you. Through them, you can determine, are they a full member, a candidate member, or just an interest group? And then working with these organizations to get more involved. So full members can nominate 2 people and they can vote. Candidate members can nominate 2 people, however, they cannot vote, but they can participate in projects. So as you will see on the slide, there is a contact email for Fiona Waters. Please reach out, get involved, because in order to make a difference, we need to participate. We need to be the change that we want to see in this world. Thank you. Fiona.
Marina, well done. Thank you so much. Great. So indeed, we are an international representation from around the globe, and we're delighted to have attendees from across the globe coming and joining us today at our Retina International Youth Conference. We'd like to thank everyone in the Americas, over in the US, Canada, South America, who are joining us at very early hours in the morning. And of course, on the other side of the world, where we have people joining us from Japan, Philippines, Australia, and New Zealand, thank you for joining us on giving us your evenings to be with us today. So a universal and international issue that Retina International tackles every day is that around genetic testing and the timely and equitable access to genetic testing. This is something that we believe young people should have timely and equitable access to. And as such is a strong theme today and was chosen as the theme for session 1, where we will be having a panel discussion. I'm delighted to pass over now to Jess McQueen. Jess is a member of our Retina International Youth Council, who will be leading this panel discussion on genetic testing. Jess, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Fiona.
Ready to go when you are.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first section of the conference, all about genetic testing. There is an urgent need for equitable access to affordable genetic testing for inherited retinal degenerations on a global level. IRDs are actionable conditions, and without access to genetic testing services, patients live with inaction. Retina International and its members on all continents believe there is an urgent need for the disparity in genetic testing and counselling services to be addressed. In this session, we will explore the reasons for genetic testing, the role of genetic counselling, and welcome the personal stories and reflections from panellists who have undergone the genetic testing process. My name is Jess McQueen, and I'm a representative of the Retina International Youth Council, as well as a member of Retina New Zealand. I was lucky enough to have been tested to find out exactly what gene of retinitis pigmentosa I have inherited. I'm joined today by 4 incredible panellists. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on this panel today. First up, I would like to introduce Ms. Michelle Glaze. Michelle is the Associate Director of Professional Outreach for the Foundation Fighting Blindness. Michelle joined the Foundation in February 2019 after 15 years in medical sales. Her passion for this role with the Foundation stems from personal challenges with vision loss due to retinitis pigmentosa. Next, we are delighted to be welcoming Carrie Branham. Carrie is a clinical assistant professor and director of ophthalmic genetic counseling at the University of Michigan's Kellogg Eye Center. She received her master's degree in genetic counseling from the University of Michigan in 2002 and has been providing genetic counseling services to patients affected with inherited retinal degeneration since that time. And now a warm welcome to Kirill Baybarin. Kirill is joining our panel from Moscow, Russia. He is a founder and president of the non-profit organization Look to See, supporting patients with inherited retinal degenerations. He is a father to a 16-year-old boy with Stargardt disease. Kirill will be sharing his experience with genetic testing. And finally, we are welcoming Shiny Saravanamuthu. Shiny lives in Montreal, Canada as an accountant. In 2011, she was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa. Having no one in her family with the disease, Shiny was determined to go through the genetic testing process. She'll be sharing her story with us today. A quick note to our audience, please remember to note down any questions you may have for our panelists, as there will be time at the end to have these questions answered. Press Alt and Y on your keyboard and we'll get to as many of you as we can at the end. So without further ado, let's jump into our discussion around genetic testing. Michelle, you've prepared a presentation for us today. Would you share that with us now?
Jess, can you put up my slides for me?
Sure.
Thank you.
Hi, Michelle, they're coming.
Hi, thank you.
You go.
Great, thank you so much. Jess, I appreciate the introduction and thank you to everyone who's joining today. I'm Michelle Glaze, and as Jess mentioned, I joined the Foundation Fighting Blindness in 2019 professionally. My role in professional outreach enables me to connect with eye care professionals in the United States. And my role is to educate them about all of the resources available to patients with inherited retinal disease, one of which is genetic testing. While I'm an employee of the Foundation Fighting Blindness, I was clinically diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa in 2004. So what I do in professional outreach, I am very passionate about. Like many of you in the audience, I clearly remember that moment that I was diagnosed. And I remember how scared and frightened and just disconcerted I felt about it. I spent many years in trying to deny my disease. I tried to ignore it away, wish it away. And in 2011, I came to realize that I really was feeling the impact of my vision loss. In 2011, I hired my first round of drivers. And at that time, I was in the pharmaceutical industry and was traveling all day, every day, and could no longer do that. So I had to find a way to adjust and adapt. It was also in 2011 that I discovered the Foundation Fighting Blindness as a patient, as a constituent. And I was attracted to the foundation because of the mission of the organization to drive research to find treatments and cures for blinding retinal diseases. In 2011, I formed a Vision Walk team. Vision Walk is a flagship fundraiser that the Foundation Fighting Blindness hosts. And it was the first time that I ever stepped out and said, I have vision loss. I felt very empowered. I wanted to do something. And that was the way that I first got involved with the Foundation Fighting Blindness. Today, I want to talk about the foundation. I want to talk about some of the resources, genetic testing, and some other things that I think are important for patients with inherited retinal diseases to be aware of. You can advance the slides, please. So the Foundation Fighting Blindness has been around for 50 years. We are actually celebrating our 50-year anniversary in September. And the mission, as I said, is to drive research to find treatments and cures for blinding retinal diseases. Over the last 50 years, the foundation has grown to be the largest private funder of retinal degenerative disease research in the world. and the organization has raised over $816 million towards the mission. The foundation funds a variety of different types of research projects, lab, translational research. We fund a variety of clinical trials and have formed a RD fund to support this effort. The foundation offers career development awards to professionals who are looking to care for patients with inherited retinal disease. We fund natural history studies. And today I want to spend some time also talking about the patient registry and genetic testing program that the Foundation Fighting Blindness has developed. The goal here is to eradicate the entire spectrum of retinal degenerative diseases. This includes retinitis pigmentosa, Stargardt disease, Usher syndrome, LCA, and many others. Now, the foundation does offer a variety of resources for patients, and a lot of information can be found on our website, which is fightingblindness.org. There's information for individuals who have just been diagnosed, information about clinical research, educational videos and webinars about all the different inherited retinal diseases and clinical research that's underway. So I would encourage you to check out our website if you're interested in learning more, and you can find a lot of the information that I'm talking about today on our website. Next slide, please. So genetic testing, why is genetic testing important for individuals with an inherited retinal disease? There are several reasons. First, it can confirm or change a clinical diagnosis. With the inherited retinal diseases, many can look alike. I recently interfaced with a family who has a little boy who was diagnosed clinically with retinitis pigmentosa. After he got genetic testing done, it was found that he actually had LCA, and that was very powerful for the family. They were able to connect with other families, other children who have the same genetic mutation. They've gotten involved in a support group. So it's really important to confirm that clinical diagnosis because sometimes that will change. It also provides more accurate prognosis for patients. So patients have a better understanding of what to expect with their vision loss over time. It can also confirm inheritance patterns and risk factors for other family members. I received genetic testing in 2015, and the reason that I got genetic testing done is because I have a little boy, and I wanted to know if there was a chance that he might be impacted by my disease and have RP. When I got genetic testing done, I had one pathogenic mutation in RP1, and I also had one variant of unknown significance in RP1, and I'll talk a little bit more later about why it was important for me to not only receive genetic testing, but also genetic counseling as a result of my genetic diagnosis. Also, genetic testing can potentially qualify patients for clinical trials or the first and only FDA-approved gene therapy that is currently out there and available for patients with mutations in RPE65. This gene therapy is called Luxturna. And I think that this is a really important aspect to the whole program. With the Foundation Fighting Blindness, we really want to provide patients with support and guidance, but most importantly, we want to provide hope. And clinical trials and potential treatments, actual treatments out there now, they really do instill a vast amount of hope for individuals who are impacted. And I think it's really important to note that. There are currently over 40 clinical trials underway, and this is on a global level with inherited retinal diseases. And many of these do require a genetic diagnosis if a patient is interested in getting involved. Now, these clinical trials range in gene-specific therapies, but there are also a lot of gene-agnostic approaches out there and available. So there are some research projects underway right now that have implications for a multitude of individuals, and it's not specific to one gene. For example, there are some neuroprotective strategies, there are optogenetic approaches, there are stem cell treatments, just to name a few. So genetic diagnosis is important, and there are a lot of things underway that can potentially be helpful for the future. Next slide, please. So in order to move therapies from the lab into FDA approval, patients are needed for clinical trials. And in order for the Foundation Fighting Blindness to move things along and drive the research forward, genetic testing is something that was recognized to be very important. So the Foundation Fighting Blindness created a genetic testing program. It's called the My Retina Tracker Open Access Program. And this is truly a best-in-class partnership between Blueprint Genetics, Informs DNA, and the Foundation Fighting Blindness. Now, I do want to note that this no-cost genetic testing option is available only to patients in the United States who have been clinically diagnosed with an inherited retinal disease. And it does require that patients have not been tested with another program of more than 32, or another panel of more than 32 genes over the last 4 years. Blueprint Genetics offers the My Retina Tracker panel. It is a 322 gene panel. So it is very broad and does capture many of the inherited retinal diseases. Informed DNA is our no-cost genetic counseling partner. And I actually have some experience with Informed DNA. I received genetic counseling through this program. They are very knowledgeable and well-versed, and genetic counseling is very important so that patients understand what the genetic test results mean and what the implications can be for the future. As I mentioned, I had a pathogenic mutation in RP1. I had a variant of unknown significance in RP1. What that meant for me is that I didn't know whether my RP was recessive or dominant. And that was really important for me to understand what the impact would be for my son. Through my genetic counseling at Informed DNA, they were able to uncover that when I got my genetic testing done and there was a variant of unknown significance, there had been further research done. So I had genetic testing in 2015, met with the counselor at Informed DNA in 2019. That variant of unknown significance had been reclassified to likely pathogenic. With that reclassification, with my family history, with my genetic testing results, they were able to share with me that my RP is recessive. And what that meant for my family is that my son had little to no chance of having RP. So that was a huge relief. And I can't underscore how important genetic counseling is. And I'm looking forward to Carrie's presentation on this. But this program really does help patients and families to understand and manage their inherited retinal disease. It helps to drive clinical research for patients with inherited retinal disease, and it also gets patients on a path towards clinical trials and potential treatments. Now, the third leg of the My Retina Tracker Open Access Program is the My Retina Tracker Patient Registry, and that's offered through the Foundation Fighting Blindness. Next slide, please. So the My Retina Tracker Registry is a global registry. This is available to anyone who has been clinically diagnosed with an inherited retinal disease, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. It's a free platform, it's secure, it's very easy to use. This is a way for individuals with an inherited retinal disease to really raise their hand and be seen by the research community. Researchers can potentially recruit patients for clinical trials, but this is a confidential platform. So what happens is if you go online and you create a record, there is an alphanumeric code that is associated with your record. So if researchers, biotech, pharmaceutical companies are looking for individuals for potential clinical trials, they can look at that registry and they'll receive that alphanumeric code. From there, they would contact the Foundation Fighting Blindness and identify that record number. And then the foundation would contact the patient and let them know that there is an interest in being recruited or having a discussion about a clinical trial that's underway. So everything is patient controlled. The information that's entered, whether or not there's an interest in pursuing clinical research, but it is a platform through which research can be pushed through the pipeline. And it's a way for the research community to find patients so that we can get to treatments and cures for the inherited retinal diseases. Currently, we have about 16,000 active or useful registrants in the My Retina Tracker registry. This slide needs to be updated a little bit. We've had more than 150 requests for access by researchers and companies, but it is a resource that they do use to identify patients. If you'd like more information about the My Retina Tracker registry, you can go to myretinatracker.org. Next slide, please. You can also visit our website at fightingblindness.org. And if there are any specific questions about the Foundation Fighting Blindness, our genetic testing program, or anything related to the inherited retinal diseases that I can help with, my email is mglaze@fightingblindness.org. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Jess?
As we come to the panel discussion, Carrie, I'll come to you first.
Sorry,
Perhaps
Jess.
first, hi.
May I just
could you-
interject? Hi, I'm just
Sorry.
wondering if Kirill is in the audience and if they could make themselves known to us by raising your hand. If you could press Alt-Y. Kirill, if you're there, could you press Alt-Y to raise your hand or make yourself known in the audience? No worries. Thank you, Jess. Please continue.
Okay. Okay, Carrie, could you please share with us what genetic testing is and an overview of the process, please?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak at your meeting. As I hope you'll hear from me today, I think genetic counseling and genetic testing are super important to patients affected with inherited retinal disease. And I know Michelle set that up very nicely, talking about kind of the reasons why we do genetic testing. I am going to take a couple of minutes now to just explain a little bit more about kind of what genetic testing is and the process that patients can go through to obtain genetic testing. So really kind of simply put, genetic testing is a process for understanding what has caused someone to be affected with a genetic condition. To understand a little bit more about this, it's kind of important to get a refresher in genetics, which many people have studied in school, may not have thought about it all that much, but genes are really the basic units of heredity. They're made up of DNA and passed on from our parents. We all have about 25,000 different genes, and these genes are basically responsible how our bodies function as humans. When genetic testing is done, the lab works to understand what gene is not working properly and what gene is responsible for a person to be affected with a genetic condition, such as RP, Stargardt, Usher syndrome, or other inherited retinal condition. Out of those about 25,000 different genes, researchers have identified around 270 to 300 different genes that have identified as a cause of disease for patients that are affected with inherited retinal disease. Genetic testing is something that's usually ordered by a healthcare professional, such as an ophthalmologist, genetics doctor, or a genetic counselor. In pretty much all cases, except for some, there is some genetic testing that is directly sent we call it direct to consumer testing, where you can get your ancestry done or something like that. Typically, genetic testing has to be ordered by a healthcare professional. When the testing is performed, a patient will give a sample. Usually this is a blood sample, but it can be something like a saliva sample or a cheek swab of the inside of your cheek. The lab will extract the DNA from that sample and analyze specific genes of interest in a lab. To identify what is the genetic cause of disease, the lab basically compares the DNA from a person affected with an inherited retinal disease to a normal or reference sequence, so someone who's not affected to retinal disease. And they're looking for any difference. They're looking for any changes in the DNA, which will impact that gene and cause the gene to not work properly. This change is something, it may be called a mutation. As Michelle had mentioned, it's something that may be called a pathogenic variant as well. Those basically mean the same thing, pathogenic variant and mutation. They mean that the gene is impacted in a way that is not working properly and will be responsible or will cause a disease. So while that lab portion of the genetic testing, so taking a sample and trying to identify mutations causing disease, is pretty much the same universally, there definitely will be differences in the testing around the world. And I did want to touch on that a little bit because I know we do have an international audience here. And I've been working with genetic testing in the US for a long time. I have a lot of familiarity with that. And from talking to people, talking to other researchers, talking to patients in different places, I know that there are big differences in things like the availability of this test. I'm not an expert in all genetic testing practices in all countries, but I do have some idea about the differences that I've heard. So I wanted to kind of touch on those to help people understand how the process differs around the world. So these differences in testing may simply be the availability of the testing. Genetic testing labs exist in many, many different countries, but there are some countries where they have little or no genetic testing labs available. What that means is if a patient is going to have genetic testing in some countries, they'll need to have the sample sent out to a different country. Sometimes that does cause problems because my understanding is that some countries the government will have regulations in which samples may not be sent out of their home country. So that definitely can be a challenge. Another kind of difference that we see is the type of test that's offered within a lab. So I mentioned that there are around 270, 300 different inherited retinal disease genes, but some different genetic tests that are done. Some will test for just a small subset of genes. Sometimes that may be for a specific diagnosis, maybe only testing for RP or only testing for Stargardt disease or only testing for Usher syndrome, but not testing for all of them together. Some panels do that. They test across all of the different genes. And the reason for that is very much what Michelle had touched on, that we can see a lot of overlap in the different diagnoses, the different genes that can cause people to be affected with different conditions. And because of that, some of the labs will do testing across large panels of genes for all of the different genes that are known to cause a particular condition. There can also be, there's other differences in the labs. Sometimes these may be commercial genetic testing labs. That would be something such as Blueprint Genetics. There's a number of other commercial labs around the world that do genetic testing. Or there may be labs which are research labs and associated with things like large hospitals or associated with a university. There can be differences in the cost of the testing between countries. In some cases, it may be that the patient will be responsible for, or their insurance may be responsible for the cost of genetic testing, and it sometimes can be very expensive. In other places, there may be government funds or research funds that can support the cost of the testing. As Michelle mentioned, we're fortunate in the US to have the genetic testing program set up through Foundation Fighting Blindness, in which the genetic testing can be done at no cost. And just to kind of conclude, I really do hope that through more awareness of organizations such as Retina International and like the Foundation Fighting Blindness, there'll be more awareness of the importance of genetic testing for patients affected with inherited retinal disease, and hopefully the availability of this genetic testing will spread as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carrie, for that information. Shiny, could you share with us a bit about your journey to genetic diagnosis with RP?
Yes. Hi, how are you? So my name is Shiny and I'm from Montreal and I'm 31 years old right now. I was diagnosed with RP just as soon as I turned 21. So that was in 2011. So the beginning part of that, I just knew I had RP, but I'm also from a South Asian community. So it's not a community that really talks about illness or disabilities. So it was kind of hard to like figure out if anyone in my family even had this or even anyone spoke about it, if they just kind of hid it. And medical files and stuff aren't as readily available back home for me to get access to. So that was kind of a struggle. So in 2016, when my specialist had recommended that he wanted me to do the genetic testing panel for his research. So like Carly said, I just had to do a blood sample, and that was actually tested against 80 identified genes for RP. So unfortunately, my results came back and my genetic counselor sat me down. We were talking and I didn't have any match to any of the mutations. So it was kind of like discouraging, but at the same time, I was like, okay, so for now, I just had to be patient and to hope. And she told me, like, they are working on a lot. Science is ever evolving. So just to be patient. Fast forward 2018 February, my genetic counselor did call me back and said, hey, we can test you against about 280 now. So we do want you to come back in, get tested. And since this is through my ophthalmologist, my RP specialist, who is also doing research, and I live in Canada also, so I didn't have to pay anything. So I gave in a blood sample and it actually got sent to the States. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a lab somewhere, I believe in Texas. So there was about 60 days for me to find out my results. So I got tested in February 2018, found out 2 months later. So like right in the middle of COVID. So it was a bit of a delay, but I did find out. But once again, unfortunately, I did not find any match. But she was able to tell me that I didn't test for Usher and that my gene was also recessive. So if I were to have kids, there would be a very low chance that I would pass them over to my kid. But also a good thing about genetic testing and having access to a genetic counselor is like you get these results and I personally have no idea how to read them. So it's great to have a genetic counselor who kind of like walks you through it and like like when you have questions she was able to address everything and like just kind of calm me down even though I didn't have a match and just kind of reassure me like not to stress and like we all us being in this community like you do know that's like people are working so hard and just knowing that 2-year difference how there was so much like more to test against just gives me hope that maybe in another 2 years I'll get another call and they'll be able to identify more. So it's just even though I don't know what I have, it's just good to know that there's people working in the background to make sure to find out a bigger picture. And I hope one day I will find out just to like get a better idea just because like no one in my family has any sort of retinal or any sort of eye condition. So it's kind of like as my researcher and all of them say, I'm a guinea pig in this world because I just don't test against anything. So and I know like when I did get my results, I was told that someone is interested in taking another blood sample against me for another research just because I keep not testing against anything and there's no family history. And then also another good thing is that when I do decide to have kids and when I know who my partner is, he's also able to come in and get genetic testing done for free as it's under family planning. So which is kind of nice also to know like I can have that resource and to be able to know that like as a couple we'll have a better idea of if my partner has anything or if us together will pass any other eye diseases down to our children. So
Great, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story, Shiny.
no problem. No problem.
Okay, Kirill, thank you for joining us. You've gone through genetic testing in Russia. Could you share a bit about your experience? And are there any parts of Shiny's story that contrast with yours?
Hello, everybody. I'm a head of patient organization in Russia. And as a head, I know many patient stories. And I would like to share with you our common view of situation in Russia. In a few words, it becomes better. But we still have 3 problems. First, low awareness, let's say, low genetic awareness of ophthalmologists and retina specialists. The most common advice to patients a few years ago were, I don't care about genetic testing, there is no cure at this moment. Or you can do it if you like it, but there is no real reason for this. Second, low access to genetic specialists. We have only one government public genetic center in Moscow and a few private health centers. and line list of waiting to public genetic center about 6 months. And not in general, genetic testing is not covered by public insurance, just some options. And a third problem is lack of counseling. The most common situation when a patient get results with letters and numbers, and that's it. He understand what he has a disease, he has a inherited condition, but what he or she should do with it, no information. But last year, government launched a new foundation to help children with rare disease. And after that, interest to genetic testing grows. And government launched some programs for genetic testing, but not for vision conditions. Second good news, new technical university in Russia, in Sochi, got one special grants for genetic testing and development of treatment, including vision conditions. And third, after launch of Luxturna in Russia and activity of Novartis, they launched some programs for patients. And as I said in the beginning of my small presentation, situation becomes better. And I hope that next few years, it may be not perfect, but maybe wait time between diagnosis of ophthalmologist and genetic testing should be 1 month or 2, not more. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Kirill. Michelle, in your presentation, you speak about the why of genetic testing for those living with an IRD. Could you tell us about the importance of genetic testing in the context of advocacy and retinal research?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I'm having some, it was breaking up.
Oh, no worries, sorry, yeah, sure. In your presentation, you spoke about the why of genetic testing for those living with an IRD. Can you tell us about the importance of genetic testing in the context of advocacy and retinal research?
Well, yes, there are a variety of clinical trials underway in the inherited retinal disease space. And many of those trials do require, most of them require a genetic testing result in order to participate as a patient or as an individual with an inherited retinal disease. Gene-specific therapies, gene replacement therapies, there are many trials that are going on right now in the field. And most of those are for one specific genetic mutation. So in order for a patient or an individual to participate, the identification of that particular gene is vital. There are, as I mentioned before, a variety of research projects underway that are not gene specific, but even then it's important to have a genetic testing result so that the researchers know exactly what's going on and the specific disease is identified. That's why it's so important to get genetic testing in the way of research, is so that you can know exactly what's going on from a genetic standpoint and confirm what the clinical diagnosis has been if you've been diagnosed by a physician. And Carrie may have some additional information around that would be helpful as well.
Great. So is there anything you'd like to add, Carrie?
Sorry, I needed to unmute myself. You know, I really think definitely the more we understand about these conditions, so any patients who have genetic testing, it helps the clinicians who do that genetic testing, it helps them to understand. And then if they are participating in broader databases, such as the My Retina Tracker Registry, every person who has genetic testing is something that we can learn from. One of the things that I'm always saying is the more we learn, the less we know. Yes, that's right. Because there's always an exception to the rule. Like I've been doing this for about 20 years, but I'm always surprised at genetic testing results that we get on a patient. So it helps the clinicians from that end to understand more about these diseases and be able to recognize them better. But it also helps the broader research community through some of the large databases that we have to really help to recognize and understand. So definitely it's super important for the patient, but it's helpful for the community overall as well.
Awesome, thank you. So Carrie, while you're there, can you share with us a bit about the role of a genetic counsellor in the genetic testing process, and what benefits do you believe the added support of genetic counselling can bring?
Yeah. So I'm super excited actually to hear everybody on the panel speaking highly of genetic counselors and the things that we do as a part of the process. You know, I work in a job where many people have not heard about a genetic counselor. They don't know what one does. So when I tell someone, oh, I'm a genetic counselor, I get kind of blank stares of not knowing exactly what that is. So genetic counselors, we're healthcare professionals. We work as part of a team. In my case, I work specifically in the Department of Ophthalmology. So I work as a part of a team of ophthalmologists, electrophysiologists who do all of the testing in the clinic. We actually have 2 genetic counselors who work there. So we work as a part of a team. And I would say that my role is to kind of work with the patients from the beginning of their diagnosis, continuing on throughout their life. I actually have some patients that I've continued to meet with over 10, 20 years from the time they were children till adults. So initially, working with patients in clinic, helping to gather information about family history, that's a piece of the puzzle for understanding exactly what's going on with them. And then after the physician makes the diagnosis, it will be talking to the patient about that diagnosis. Sometimes the doctors only have 5 or 10 minutes to talk to the patient, whereas my genetic counseling sessions are half hour to an hour long. They're definitely longer sessions, taking the time to talk about the diagnosis. We also will work with patients to arrange the genetic testing. So finding a lab that can do the testing, understanding if there's different programs that they may be eligible for the testing, talking to them about payment. Is it something that they can participate in a genetic testing program in which the cost is covered? Do we have to think about payment? Do we have to think about insurance coverage? So walking through that process of arranging the testing and actually sending it to the lab. And then when we do get the results back, I think both Michelle and Shani had mentioned, there can be complexities with understanding the results of the testing. I think part of the job that I have is part of detective for figuring out exactly what's going on, but then interpreting that information for the patient. It can be really complex information and not easy for the patient to understand, not always easy for the physician to understand either. So helping understand that information, understanding what implications there may be for other family members. Sometimes there can be as high as a 50% risk for other members of the family. Sometimes it's a very low risk, less than a 1% chance. Also, we do work and provide support for our patients. So I'll work when I have a patient in the clinic, talk to them about different resources. So are there government training resources, vocational resources, low vision resources, support resources, and therapists? All of that kind of falls under what we do. And also putting patients in touch of different clinical treatment trials that may be out there that they may be eligible for. So looking forward in the future. As I mentioned, I sometimes work with patients for 5, 10, 20 years. And so very much the story that Shani was talking about, how at one time the results were negative. Sometimes we can do testing on broader panels, and sometimes we can find after many years Or as Michelle mentioned, sometimes there needs to be a reinterpretation of those results. So we can also help with that information. Having said that, I do, and again, acknowledging the international crowd that we have, I do understand that genetic counseling is not available in all countries. There are a fair number of genetic counselors in general in the States, and there's many in Canada, and I know Europe, there are many as well. Many other countries, the availability is not quite there. In the US, we have thousands of genetic counselors. Some countries may have only a small handful of genetic counselors who may not be specifically trained in ophthalmology. There are around 70 or so genetic counselors that I kind of have a listserv group of genetic counselors who work in ophthalmology. So there are 60 or 70 who work in ophthalmology, but that's around the world. So that's not too many for the whole world. But this is something that, again, I do hope for some of these things like Kirill was talking about, that through this awareness, the importance of having genetic counseling, it's definitely an important part of the process. And we hope that there's additional awareness and additional genetic counseling available for all of these patients.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carrie. I definitely agree. It's very important. Okay, Kirill and Shiny, we have a global audience of young people here today listening in, and no doubt impacted by what you've shared with us today. Do you have any parting words of wisdom or advice for young people living with retinal disease today around genetic testing?
I guess I would just say not to lose hope. Like in my case, yes, like I haven't been identified, but like Kara was saying, yes, like my blood work didn't come up with any match, but if more and more people get tested and say they find a pool of us who tend to have like the same blood work, maybe that can lead to another research. So I know, as Kira was saying, a lot of people say like, oh, what's the point? There is no cure. We might not know what our results can help discover. So just be open to that possibility. And also, if you've never heard of genetic testing or your doctor hasn't spoken about it, I guess what I used to do is every year be like, hey, are there more genes? Are there more genes for me to get? So always poke, I guess, and find out. So just always ask those questions. There's no dumb questions. There's never a wrong time to ask those kinds of questions, like, can I go get tested now? Is it available? You never know when the time will come and for your genetic counselor or your doctor to tell you to go ahead. And I guess just always have open-ended questions. Like, you never know who you'll meet and what resources they might have to help you. So always like these kinds of conferences always helps those discover things that we might not have in our country that another country might be able to help us with. So always have that open mind and just don't lose hope. In 2 years, they were able to identify 200 more genes in my case. So just don't lose hope and just keep thriving. Just don't lose hope.
As a father of a boy with Stargardt disease, I've realized that it's not a disaster to get Stargardt disease, but it's a kind of job. It's a job to live with this disease, and everybody should teach different aspect of this life. Not only genetic testing, but technical support, some optical devices, and some tips how to live with this. And I wish everybody to be positive, to be strong, and just do this job.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shiny and Kirill. Okay, thank you everyone who's spoken. We will now open up to our audience for questions. Remember to put your hand up if you haven't already.
So you can raise your hand by pressing Alt and Y on your keyboard, or simply unmute yourself. I see Jane. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Actually, I had a question for Kari. I was just wondering if sort of genetic counselling, I didn't realise it was sort of an open sort of field. Did you choose to go into retina specifically, or did it sort of happen by accident?
Yes. So I actually, you get to hear my life story. I'll be really brief though. When I graduated from college, that was in 1999, I knew I wanted to go into the field of genetic counseling. It's a master's degree. In our country, it's a master's degree. Other countries, it's a certificate program. There's different ways of doing training, but I wanted to go into the field of genetic counseling, knowing the programs were competitive. I decided to work for a couple of years, and there was actually an opening at the Kellogg Eye Center as a research assistant working with genetic studies of age-related macular degeneration. And so I worked at that for 2 years before I went, before I applied to grad schools. So I was here for the genetics, and it just happened to be in ophthalmology. And then when I graduated with my master's degree in genetic counseling, it just so happened that there was an opening at Kellogg for a genetic counselor. So I started there, and here I am 20 years later. So it's interesting though. The field keeps growing. Where we've gone from that time to now is just, it's amazing. So it's always interesting.
Is it Shafi Ahmed? You've got your hand up.
Hello, distinguished speakers. I have a question specific to genetic testing in regards to retina or the diseases related to retina. That my question is, what are the testings, or what kind of testings are we doing to diagnose diseases or problems related to retina? That's all. Thank you.
Jess, do you want me? I can answer. Is that okay?
Oh, sure. Yes. Yes. Sorry. Please go ahead.
So, you know, there are, I think I'm going to be able to answer your question. So just let me know if it's what you're looking for. So there are many different panels. So a panel is just a large number of genes that are all tested for at the same time. So these would be, you have to consider, and if you're talking about inherited retinal diseases. So there are other conditions that can affect the retina that are not considered to be genetic in the same way as like retinitis pigmentosa, Stargardt's disease, choroideremia. In those particular conditions, there are mutations in one gene which causes a person to be affected with that condition. There are other categories of diseases like age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, which also affect the retina, but they're not exactly the same. And there's not the same sort of testing is recommended for those categories. But you can, there are many different labs that offer testing, many in the States, and there are some labs outside of the United States as well that offer these panels that are specifically for inherited retinal diseases.
Great, thank you.
Jess, I have a question here from Ari, so I'm going to invite Ari to unmute in case they want to ask the question.
Wonderful, thank you, Ari.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So my question was, is there anywhere and this is to the entire panel, I suppose, is there anywhere I as a patient can find out research into IRDs in my specific country, whatever that may be, that I might be eligible to participate in because I can't necessarily access a genetic test of my own volition for financial reasons, for example?
I'd be happy to start. There are a couple of different resources that come to mind where you can identify clinical trials. The Foundation Fighting Blindness website, fightingblindness.org, does have a list of all of the inherited retinal disease clinical trials that are underway, and that is an international list. We do have research projects that are underway I can think of right now in France, the UK, Netherlands. So you can look on the clinical trials section of the Foundation Fighting Blindness website. There is also another resource, clinicaltrials.gov, so clinicaltrials.gov. And there you can do searches to find research projects that are underway for a variety of different conditions, but certainly the inherited retinal diseases as well. So those are two that come to mind that you can tap into to learn more about the clinical research that's going on.
I would second what Michelle said. Those are the two ones that I would generally recommend. The only other caveat that I would go along with that is, so I'm sure that what's on the Foundation Fighting Blindness website, they've kind of vetted everything that they're going to have on their website. In regards to the clinicaltrials.gov, I think most of those are fine as well. But I think there are, out on the internet, you're going to hear about clinical trials. Any clinical trial that you were considering, I would always recommend bringing information about that trial back to your ophthalmologist to talk to them about it. Generally, for a clinical trial, that's not something that you should have to be paying for. That's something that the funds would be covered by pharmaceutical companies, whoever, or sometimes university funds, whoever's supporting that research. But I have heard of patients, particularly some things with stem cells, that there are people out there who are doing things, and if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Things like, there's stem cell researchers, and actually some of these have appeared on the clinicaltrials.gov website, but they basically will say, whatever your problem is, if you have multiple sclerosis, if you have a spinal cord injury, if you have retinitis pigmentosa, we can fix all of those. Those are the types of trials that I would be weary of. So there's a lot of good ones out there, but definitely talking to your ophthalmologist, your local doctor, about any trials that you were considering, I'd recommend that.
Very good point, Carrie.
Wonderful, thank you. Next we'll come to Jenna. Thank you, Jenna.
Hey guys, hey from New York. So in my family, my father has had genetic testing done and they were unable to identify the gene, I suppose, I think is the terminology. And you know, so what is the outlook for being able to identify really the specific gene? Because I know that not everybody, not everybody's he has RP, for example. You can't always identify what gene it is. What's the outlook for kind of closing the information gap there?
It's a great question. I would say if we look across for a lot of the larger commercial panels, and this is again depending on what he was tested for. If he was tested for 10 genes versus 300 genes, there's a big difference there in what he was tested for. But on the large panels that we're seeing, we're able to detect the genetic cause 60% of our patients. The remaining are negative or inconclusive, meaning the genetic cause wasn't necessarily identified. But new genes are being identified all the time. What we say, and this is kind of an arbitrary thing, but I actually think it sounds similar to Shani's experience, we're kind of arbitrarily saying about 5 years to revisit it, depending on the size of the original panel. Like if we test someone on a large panel now, we say, okay, we're going to revisit this in about 5 years. And the reason for that is new genes are being discovered all the time. A lot of the new genes that are being discovered now, it may be a mutation found in a gene in 1 or 2 families in a remote country, and not a lot of other people that have it. So they're going to be minimal contributors to the overall cause of disease, but definitely we think revisiting it, but it's just not something that needs to be done right away. But it depends a lot on what he was tested for originally, how long ago it was. Technology is improving, the number of genes are all improving over time. So definitely something to be revisited, but it depends a lot on what the testing was. But we're finding new genes are being found all the time. So
thank you.
And I would just add, in my experience, my personal experience, I was tested genetically in 2015, and one of the mutations was not identified. It was a variant of unknown significance. 4 years later, when I met with a genetic counselor, that had been reclassified because there had been more information gathered. So it does happen, and 4 years isn't terribly long. So, it happens more quickly than you might anticipate. I would just add that in New York, there is a no-cost option, and it's through a company called Invitae. So if I would say that, as Carrie mentioned, identifying what type of test was offered and done, it would be worth researching to see if there might be an option out there that would yield a different result, or an option that provides a greater number of genes that are being tested by the panel. So I would ask some questions and perhaps revisit that if that's an option.
Definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona.
Hi, this is more of a question of curiosity for Shiny and probably Kirill as well, but how easy or difficult did you find it to get information on genetic testing in your regions?
So for me, it wasn't like I honestly had heard it through the grapevine. And then so I think in 2014 or 15, I had asked my RP specialist and he was like, oh, it's in the works. I'll contact you when I can have you get tested. So it was like my yearly visit. I had gone in and he gave me the contact information from my genetic counselor. And he said, it's time for you to get tested. And so that was in 2016. So it was 5 years after I got diagnosed. And so that's when I got tested for the first panel. And then 2 years later, the genetic counselor had reached out to me when there was more genes to test against. So in my case, I guess I didn't really have to work hard, I guess, in that case. I just had to poke my RP specialist in the beginning to like ask, because I did read forums and stuff before people talking about it. So I wanted to know when I can find out my genetic testing results. So that's what I was saying before, like if this is like the first time that you've been hearing about it, definitely bring it up to your healthcare professional and they might be able to guide you. And in Canada, just like the US, I had also gone to the Fighting Blindness Canada to kind of get more information, where they brought me towards the Retina tracker where I had created my profile as well. So once you get your results, you can kind of upload it there, which kind of helps everyone else have a bigger picture of things. So to conclude, it was pretty, I guess, accessible for me in Canada in the sense that my RP specialist was able to help me guide me towards my genetic counselor.
Hi, Fiona. In my personal case, it was not very difficult for me because I am a medical doctor. I don't work with eyes. I work with another part of human body. I'm a urologist. But it was clear for me that my son and our family must be tested. For other patients, the most problem from my point of view in my region, that it's not clear recommendations for or guidelines for ophthalmologists, and no clear way for patients after he is diagnosed by a retina specialist. So mostly patients find information that they should be tested in Facebook, patient sites, or from other patients, not from doctors.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, that's all the time we have for the session. I'd like to thank again our speakers, Michelle, Carrie, Kirill, and Shiny, and thank you to all who have been here for this discussion. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you all so much to Jess, our amazing host, to Kirill and Shiny, and to Michelle and Carrie. Really, really fantastic and energetic discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope all of you did too. So that brings us to the close of our very first session. I think what was a really strong theme throughout that was this idea of hope and not losing hope. And this is something we hope to carry throughout this event, and also something we want to reflect in social media. So it's no coincidence that we chose today, August 12th, to run this conference, because today is, of course, International Youth Day, and we want to celebrate hope for the young people in our community. So we want to know, what gives you hope? You'll see here we have our lovely Jess and Shiny, who you just met, and Jane as well, who have shared with us what gives them hope. Where Jess hopes to drive again, Shiny finds hope in our community, and Jane finds hope in the advancements in research that we have. So what we want you, our young people in our community, to do is to do something like this. Tell us what gives you hope. Write it down on a piece of paper and post it to us on our Instagram or Twitter. We are at Retina_int with the hashtags International Youth Day, hashtag ORIYC 2021, and hashtag Eye on the Future. And if you make sure to tag us, we'll be sure to reshare you in return. So Kirill mentioned there the importance of technical supports as well, which very conveniently brings us into our session 2, which will be on access and enablement and focus on assistive and enabling technologies as well. First, we will have a short comfort break. So we will meet back in just under 15 minutes. So it is 12:17 here in Ireland, or 13:17 CET. And we will be back here in 13 minutes to resume this really fantastic session where we discuss all about access and enablement for our community. In the meantime, I hope you find some nice comfort, get a drink, short walk around, and be sure to join in our social media call to action. Thank you all so much, and enjoy your break, and we'll see you soon. Hello and welcome back to session 2 of our Retina conference. Thank you, Dana. We have Dana, our new communications officer, in the background managing our recording. So we are indeed, as mentioned, recording this session, and we are live streaming to YouTube as well. So very welcome back to our attendees and also to those tuning in on our live stream. You're very welcome today. So without further ado, I'm delighted to kick off our session 2. So our Retina International Youth Council is all about empowerment, and this conference really is a case study of this empowerment. As the saying goes, build it and they will come. In this case, it has been give them the space and they will build it for you. Our Retina International Youth Conference pulled together this entire event in the space of 5 weeks, and we're really, really proud of everything that they've achieved to date and will go on to achieve. So to go back to our sentiment at the beginning of this meeting, that if you are interested in joining our youth council, we'd be very excited to welcome you. And to please reach out, you may email me personally at fiona.waters@retina-international.org if you'd like to learn more about joining. So Marina opened today's session with a presentation on spiritual and mental well-being of those living with IRDs. And factors that contribute to this are getting a meaningful education, purposeful work and career, and also having active social lives. This is coming closer in reach every day, thanks to the supports and enabling technologies that are coming into the market every single day. With this, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Doug Geist. Doug currently serves as Program Manager of Workforce Development at N-Site, a talent management subsidiary of National Industries for the Blind that connects employers with blind and visually impaired job-seeking professionals. Doug earned an executive certificate from the UCLA Anderson School of Management Multidimensional Leaders Institute, that's quite a mouthful, in 2014, and is certified by the US Department of Defense as a GS, Defense Procurement and Acquisition Contract Specialist. Doug is also in his 4th year as a member of Team USA, a 15-member US national blind ice hockey team, where he plays goalie. I'm really excited to welcome Doug here today, who will be speaking to us about assistive and enabling technologies. Doug, are you there?
Good morning, everyone. Fiona, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Right. So first of all, I want to thank Retina International for inviting me to this conference. I do have a personal connection to the topics discussed. So to give you a brief background, I do have retinitis pigmentosa. Like a lot of you in this age range, this was this hit close to home because I was diagnosed literally right before entering university at a top US university where I had planned to pursue a career in medicine or scientific research. Essentially, I was diagnosed at the Cleveland Clinic. I am considered like many of you, a recessive genetic recipient. There was no family history of RP in my family. So I played a lot of sports, noticed peripheral vision loss, and then my diagnosis was verified at the Massachusetts Pioneer Institute, where I entered a Harvard study was a double-blind study using nutritional supplements to see if there was a way to slow down my particular progression, which in my case just happened to be rapidly progressing. So saying that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some technologies that are available that some based in the US, some around the world, some are free, some are fairly expensive, but just want to give you an overview and share some videos. They're short videos. I think it'll be quick. So I do apologize in advance if there are some technical difficulties because I'm going to share my sound and screen. So if it's loud, just keep your mouse or your fingers near the control knob. And I'm gonna show you some really interesting technology, I would say, within the last 5-7 years, things have really progressed. When I started losing vision, there really weren't a lot of options. Maybe I had to use memory a lot and also a tape recording. So saying that, I'm going to turn off my video and I'm going to attempt to screen share here. And again, if you'll hear chatter in the background, that I do rely on a screen reader. So just ignore that and we'll progress from there. So let me turn this on. Share my sound.
Started screen share, meeting controls.
Can you see that, everyone? Or Fiona?
Hi, Doug. Yes, we can see your screen where you have a selection of videos available to you to play now.
Great. So this first device, adaptive device, essentially was created by a couple out of, I believe, Texas, and they were also experiencing vision loss. And what this is, way around way tags, these are tags that use your phone. You attach them to your clothing and so forth for labeling purposes. It's much like a hotel room key or a credit card where you don't need the camera on your phone, your smartphone, but it will detect. You can assign customized labels to these different, for instance, buttons and stickers. So let me go over to this and I will mute myself.
Alt, mute my audio with left arrow plus A, Retina International to move to an item, press the arrow keys. Retina International 1 media round underline zoom in.mp4, 1 media round enter. Windows Media Player, switch to library button to access, press spacebar, hold plus 1. Alt enter. Double MP translation, close window button to
Way
access,
around.
spacebar, enter.
Hi, Doug.
It's the smart assistant for people with vision loss that gives lots of information about everyday things.
Hi, Doug.
Versatile way tags make it easy to tag.
Control S. First, Alt.
I think you need to update
Retina
your
International to move to an
share
item, press the arrow keys. Retina International item zoom 1 media round underline zoom in.mp4, 1 media round underline zoom in. Windows Media Player to move to an item, press meeting controls. Meeting blank. Alt audio now unmuted. PC cursor.
Sorry, Fiona, what happened there?
No worries. We're still on the screen where it's showing the selection of videos.
I got you. Let me refocus that, and I apologize. Okay.
Not at all.
Okay.
Alt audio now muted. Retina International to move to an item, Windows Media Player. PC cursor. Avril Daily has joined the meeting.
Meet Way Around. It's the smart assistant for people with vision loss that gives lots of information about everyday things.
Hi, Doug.
Versatile way tags make it easy to tag items around your home and office. Pair them with.
I think if we just stop sharing and then reshare.
PC cursor. Meeting controls to move to an item, press the arrow keys. Meeting controls audio now unmuted. PC cursor.
See, I apologize in advance for this. So,
Media Player to move to an item, press the arrow keys.
Not at all.
Zoom. Volume mixer dash JAWS professional. Meeting controls. Meeting control blank. Mute currently unmuted. Audio settings. Start video left arrow plus the right arrow button.
So, Doug, I'm going to invite you to play the video, and once the video is playing, you can start sharing your screen again, and that should update it to the current, to the video.
Got it. All right, so let me go back.
Start video left arrow plus the right PC cursor. Video settings button drop down. Open participants panel. More options for participants. New share left arrow plus shift plus right there. Pause share left arrow plus the right. Annotate button to activate. Press space. Remote control button to act. More button drop down. Dock to bottom button to activate. Stop share left arrow plus right there button to activate. Windows Media Player to move to an item. Press the arrow keys.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Meet Way Around. It's the smart assistant for people with vision loss that gives lots of information about everyday things. Versatile way tags make it easy to tag items around your home and office. Pair them with the powerful Way Around app for your smartphone. Just create a description and any other details that are important to you. Then tap a way tag to store them. You can store as much information as you want. Scan a way tag anytime to hear your information read back to you.
Navy, short sleeve, cotton shirt.
It's a simple way to get better, faster information about your anything and everything. Imagine the possibilities. Tag your clothes with a description plus laundering instructions. Tag your pantry items with expiration dates and nutrition information. Tag your files, your toiletries, or even the boxes in your attic using your smartphone. Way tags are about the size of a postage stamp, and they come as stickers, magnets, buttons, and clips. They don't require any batteries or charging, and there's no fussy camera required to scan them. Way Around leverages a powerful wireless technology that is affordable, secure, and easy to use. Your information is stored and automatically backed up in the cloud. We developed Way Around specifically for those with vision loss, assuring it works seamlessly with VoiceOver and other accessibility tools. The free Way Around app is available for Android and iOS. Way Around, the smart assistant that puts information at your fingertips.
Meeting controls to move to an item, press the arrow key. Stop share left arrow, plus right there button. Alt audio now muted. Alt audio now muted.
So thank you, Fiona, for that. So that's the Way Around tag. And so it's a great way if you are experiencing difficulty reading tags of clothing and so forth, you can customize. I'm going to go right into this next device. It's out of the UK. It's something that I had purchased quite some time ago. It's handheld. It's called the Pen Friend, and this is another opportunity where you can use audio labels to label anything, frankly. I know with vision loss, a lot of us are just learning, potentially learning Braille and so forth, but this is just an interesting tool to be able to show you how you can label things accurately and efficiently. So let me go to that.
You'll just need to reshare your screen as well when you're ready. Doug, if you'd like to share your screen. Hi, Doug, can you hear me? Hello, Doug. Hello, Doug. Hi, Doug, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, so the videos aren't playing too well, so maybe you could just speak to the technologies.
Oh, I apologize. I'm not sure what's going on with the screen share. So essentially, we have a number of videos, and I can send these into links as well. The Pen Friend is an audio labeler that, like I said, you just attach these audio tags to your different documents, you can different clothing and so forth. And then where we can go into there are some amazing apps out there. One is called Microsoft Seeing AI. It is a free app available on App Store and Android as well. And what the Seeing AI app is, it's free, and it uses artificial intelligence to essentially read your documents, describe people's appearances, and so forth. And it's something that's really a game changer in the past 5 years, I would say. Again, that's Seeing AI, Seeing AI. And the next device that I was going to show you is something called OrCam, ORCAM. You may be aware of this device. It's OrCam My Eye is out of Israel, and it's a small finger-sized device you put on your glasses, and it takes pictures internally of documents, locations. It can read menus, it can read money, and so forth. It's again, ORCAM, My Eye. And then to help you navigate, there is an app. Again, these are all free, except for the OrCam. That's a device. The app is called Be My Eyes. It's international. It was invented by a gentleman from Denmark. It is a crowdsourcing app available Android and iPhone, and that's BEMYEYES, Be My Eyes app. And what that does is it uses your camera and your audio to be able to essentially connect you with worldwide volunteers that look through your device, and they're able to help you navigate. They're able to help you identify things. It's really an amazing tool that people have. So saying that, do people have any questions on kind of where to look for some of these devices? Or Fiona, if you want to check the chat or what have you, and I can see what's happening with my share here.
No worries at all. So yes, if you have any questions for Doug, we invite you to please raise your hand. You can do so by pressing Alt-Y. So I see Roisin here shot up with the hand there. So Roisin, I'm going to invite you to unmute, and you may ask your question to Doug.
Can you hear me?
You can, yes.
Yes.
Okay, so the app that you tried showing us there with the labels in the first video, is that available on iOS like in all countries, or is it just certain countries that you can avail of the app?
Yeah, the app is available on App Store, and the labels can be they can be ordered, and they're about $1 US each. And the way around way tags, and you can order these.
So like, is that app available like in all countries?
It should be, yes. And you might want to check if you're using Android. I think most of us use iOS devices. So
yeah, I'm on iOS.
Sure. And
then, you know, the OrCam.
Yes.
How much would that be, or like, would you be able to like get that out on trial just to like see what it's like, or once you get it you have to like buy it?
They do have return policies. It is supported in a lot of countries and languages. It is expensive, and I have seen that people use GoFundMe or donations and so forth to be able to purchase it. And when I say expensive, you know, the lower model is in the 3,000 range, and the higher end model, which does facial recognition for friends, you can store friends' pictures and so forth, is a little over 4,000. So that's the most expensive device, essentially, that I wanted to show you. But the other tools are all free. Like the Seeing AI app is probably what most people will use because that's free. And then of course, Be My Eyes is another great option to be able to navigate. I'll give you an example. I was at a conference and people were moving chairs around, and I pulled out the app and I had somebody connect to me real time. I had a woman from Costa Rica, somebody from Africa, somebody from the United States look through my camera and help me navigate or read business cards, so forth, if that helps.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question.
Yeah, thank you for answering my questions.
Sure.
Thank you, Roisin. Great. I see Alani here has your hand up. Alani.
Hi, Doug. So something I've found quite challenging is finding a screen reader that can read PDFs. And I know lots of people say there isn't really one that works for PDFs. So I don't know if you maybe have a suggestion of one.
So the later versions of JAWS, I know it's fairly expensive, but they've created onboard optical character recognition for PDFs now. So it automatically detects it when you open a scanned PDF, and it does a pretty good job. I would say that JAWS probably does the best as far as onboard. And then, Adobe has some built-in functionality. It's a little difficult with tables, but it's getting better and better. If that helps, again, I think JAWS is probably your best selection. Microsoft does have they have an app called Office Lens that does a pretty decent job with if you're looking at documents through your phone. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Anybody else with questions on just simple tools that you might be able to, rely upon, or any challenges? I'd be happy to help you with identifying those.
That's great. There's no questions that I see in our participants so far. If you would like to ask a question, we have time for just one more. If you'd like to raise your hand, you can press Alt-Y. And if not, I'm sure Doug would be very happy if we forwarded those questions on afterwards, if that was okay with you, Doug.
And what I can offer too is if there's the capability, I have these videos all as MP4 files that if I have them in a zip folder too, that if anybody would like to look at them on their own time, that would be also an option.
I think what we can do is play them during the break tomorrow, during our 15-minute comfort break. Perhaps we can play them and get them working then. I'm sure that they're full of information.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Doug, for your time. It was really great to learn about these technologies, to learn about what's out there and the new opportunities that are coming every single day.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you everybody for your patience, and sorry about the technical difficulties. These things happen. I'm not sure
they truly do.
The technology is great, but it's not always perfect. So again, I apologize and thank you so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. It isn't a virtual conference until you've had some technical difficulties. So
oh yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask now, I don't see Kirk Adams in our participants list. Kirk, if you are there, could you kindly unmute and make yourself known? No problem at all. I'll skip forward to next on our agenda, which is Karen Wolf. Karen, are you there?
I am indeed.
You're very welcome, Karen. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us here today. It's an early start for you, I understand.
It is, but I'm happy to be here and happy to be with you today.
I'm very happy to have you. So Dr. Karen Wolf manages a private practice as a career counselor and consultant in Austin, Texas. She coordinates content for the World Blind Union's Employment Resources website, Project Aspiro, and consults with organizations and schools worldwide on employability skills training and transition programming for individuals with visual disabilities, and teaches distance education courses. So Karen is here to speak with us today about Project Aspiro and around career planning and education planning. So Karen, without further ado, I'm delighted to hand over to you.
My thanks to you, Fiona, for the introduction, and to you and all of the participants for joining me early morning here, but wherever you are in the world, it's my pleasure to join you today. I have put up a PowerPoint presentation for those of you who can see it, just because I know that it's much easier sometimes to follow when you have a visual cue, but I will read everything, so not to worry if you don't have it in front of you. On this first slide, I really just let you know the title, which is Project Aspiro Overview. I give you my name, Dr. Karen Wolf, and I give you my email because, as we saw with Doug, sometimes it's tricky to get in all of the questions during a session, and I'm very happy to help any of you at any time. So please feel free to email me if you have questions following my presentation, or if you have videos you'd like to contribute to Project Aspiro now or in the future. The trick with reaching me is to use email and to spell my name correctly. So I will spell it out for you. It's all lowercase. There are no dots, no dashes, no underscores. KarenWolffe@gmail.com. Please don't hesitate. My overarching advice for all of you all the time as you approach any transition in your life, whether it's from school into work or from high school into post-secondary or from being single to being married, whatever the transition may be, I encourage you to always think at the very beginning of whatever it is you're about to move into or do about the end goal you are trying to achieve. So on the screen, I just say to you, begin with the end in sight. If you know you want to go to university, what do you need to study while you are in high school, middle school, elementary? If you know you want to move into a field of technology or engineering or music or dance or anything, what do you need to be doing now? Whom do you need to be meeting? How to make it happen? Begin with the end in sight. And then on this next screen, I give you the practical, functional approach to making it all happen. And that is research. Research, research, research. If you're not sure what to expect, find out. If you think you know what to expect, make sure. Do your research. And on this slide, I give you some very specific ideas, including, of course, Project Aspiro, which I think is one of the outstanding websites available online, particularly for people who are blind or have vision impairment, who are in the process of trying to decide what they want to be when they grow up, how to make success in their lives, et cetera, et cetera. So Project Aspiro has some wonderful stories about blindness and visual impairment and how to do the things you want to do, as well as content. But I also remind you that on YouTube alone, you can see some wonderful videos. Many blind and low vision people are putting up videos that you may find of interest, and you may want to add some of your own. But I always encourage you to start and end with Project Aspiro. And on this slide, I give you the hyperlink, or for those of you who aren't able to see it at the moment, it's a simple www.projectaspiro, projectaspiro.com. To interview people with sight loss for information, people who have experienced something like what you are experiencing. It won't be the same, but it will be similar. are a wonderful, wonderful resource and never to be discounted. So interview those folks with sight loss and find out from them what they did, how they did it, what tools they used, etc., so that you can be as aware as them as you move forward in your career search. And then in the United States, we have two absolutely brilliant resources for young people to help them explore careers. And I've given you the hyperlinks on this slide. I will share my slides with anyone who is interested. They're all easily accessible, but if you have difficulty with PowerPoint, let me know and I'll send you a Word file. But you just email me and ask for it and I will send it over to you with all the hyperlinks embedded. But our Bureau of Labor Statistics in the United States has something called the Occupational Outlook Handbook, which has about 250 to 300 top of the line occupations that have lots of jobs available that are ideal for careers. And I mention it to you no matter what country you live in, because I think you would find a great deal of just good information about job duties that are involved, links to professional organizations where you might reach out to a potential mentor. Might not be someone with sight loss, but it would be someone doing that job and you could make contact. And then the second resource I've given you from BLS, or Bureau of Labor Statistics, is called the Career Outlook, which is another really fine resource with topical information. So 1 month they might be focusing on jobs just in culinary arts. Another month they might be focusing on technology jobs or other STEM kinds of careers. It's worth a look if you are interested in exploring careers. But let me tell you more about Project Aspiro per se. When you get to the home page, when you land on the home page at Project Aspiro, there will be 4 choices. And the first choice on the left, because we always run in this country from left to right, because that follows our reading in English pattern, is the option called Planning Your Career. And that offers you the most for your time, if you will, when you are in the early stages of your career planning. Choose Planning Your Career, and it will give you the following choices: living independently, learning and education, preparing for work, and working life. And if you go to working life, I encourage you to check out Ken's story. It's a wonderful story about a man up in Canada who is working as a radio producer technician, who talks not just about his current job in radio, but more importantly, in my estimation, all the other jobs he did before he got there, how he worked when he was a youngster, how he followed that work with work as a young adult and then as a mature adult. It's a fabulous story and one that I think you would enjoy. What else? Project Aspiro also offers you some assessment tools that are available for self-evaluation. The one that I would recommend to youth is called the Transition Competencies Checklist. There are checklists on self-advocacy skills, home or personal management skills, orientation and mobility skills, etc. There are also tip sheets on finding mentors, conversational skills, and improving literacy skills. The checklists and tip sheets are all free, downloadable in English or French. Those are the only 2 language options we have at the moment. Obviously, if you drop it down in English or French and you don't speak one of those languages, you can use Google Translate to translate the documents for you into your preferred language. There's also information about job search techniques and addressing employer concerns, which I think would be of interest to all of you. But most importantly, in my estimation anyway, are the posted success stories from blind and low vision people worldwide. One of my favorites is a beekeeper in Uganda who has submitted a story, but there are wonderful stories. There are stories literally from all over the world. Ireland, Japan, England, Australia, New Zealand, the United States, Canada, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Lots from Taiwan recently. So if you have any interest, I encourage you to go to the site, click on success stories, and a whole series of videos and audio interviews will pop up for you to link to. Now, I'm going to take a pause and say that if you have any need for further information, you may contact me. Again, it's karenwolf@gmail.com. Let me know if you'd like the PowerPoint and I'll send it over to you. And with that, I thank you for your interest and open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Karen. That was really, really insightful. So I'd like to invite now, if anyone in the audience has any questions, you can raise your hand using Alt and Y. Okay, so we got one via the chat there, Karen, where there was questions around, what is the most practical advice for someone when emerging from education into the career space? What would be your key piece of advice to someone embarking on that journey?
Well, I would say to you, determine what it is you want to do. Think about what career you want, what jobs you want, and then start that research. Read books, go online, find out as much as you can about the job. But then I think it really boils down to looking very closely at your personal network. Who do you know and who do they know? And do any of the people that you know or the people that they know, that broader network of extended friends, extended acquaintances, do any of them know someone who is doing the job or the career that you want to do? And then begin those, what I would call informational interviews, not asking for work, but trying to gather information about the career that you are interested in, both from those people within your network and from anyone that you know of or can find through resources like Project Aspiro, who is blind or has low vision and can give you additional information about the career, with the complement of being able to talk to you about how someone without good vision is doing that job. Make sure you have good questions, like what training would I really need? What tools would you use in your job? How long have you worked in this job? What jobs did you do before this job? What training did you get? What path might you recommend to me? Do you know of any apprenticeships or temporary work that might be available in the future that I might apply for to get into this career? Write out all your questions, write them out in print or braille, and then go out there and start doing your interviews. And when you interview friends, acquaintances, or people you don't know but have been recommended to you, ask permission to record those interviews, ask all of your questions, and ask them, what have I forgotten to ask you? Can you tell me, what do you like the most about your job? What do you like the least about your job? Think about what you need to know. What kind of schedules do you follow? Any questions that you have, record all that information, get yourself at least 3 to 5 interviews, and then come back home, review what you've learned from the people, review what you've learned from the resources, and then begin to apply for jobs. Making sure that you're applying for jobs that are not necessarily at the top of the ladder, closer to the bottom of the ladder in the beginning, but that meet your basic requirements for salary, for schedule, for leading toward the ultimate career that you want. that would be my advice to you.
It's really great, Karen, and it's, I think, universal advice for anyone entering the job market, truly. So we have two Marinas with their hands raised. So I'll come to Marina Leite first. So Marina, over to you if you'd like to unmute.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you all. So my question, it's do you hear me, right?
I hear you well, thank you.
Okay. So Dr. Karen, when it comes to find a job, we people living with a visual impairment, we face a lot of prejudice and discrimination. Once some people asked me if I was able to read, stuff like that, very simple. And I would like to hear from you, what are your tips for us to face this discrimination and this prejudice when it comes to finding a job and also to be employee and like perspective in our career? How can we face this discrimination and prejudice?
Mariana, thank you very much for the question. It's one that comes up frequently, and I recognize that there is prejudice in the world around us because most people are fully sighted, and it's really that they just don't understand or know what it means to be visually impaired. And people tend to fear what they don't know. So my first piece of advice to you is always, always anticipate what they are going to be concerned about. And I mentioned when I was giving my quick little overview that employers have concerns. All sighted employers, almost all, I shouldn't say all, almost all sighted employers have 4 major concerns about hiring blind or visually impaired people. I speak to them on Project Aspiro under employer concerns, but let me tell you what they are. They're all concerned about safety. That is the number one concern. If you present well, if you are able to go in person, walking comfortably with or without a cane, it doesn't matter. It's just, can you walk comfortably from point A to point B, look like you are confident, manage in an environment that may have chairs or other things you got to get around. If you can portray confidence, that's the first step in resolving the safety issue. But know that employers are concerned about safety. So at some point in your introduction, you may want to say something about the fact that you love to ski, or you love to swim, or you love to take long hikes, that gives some hints that you are competent, capable, able, more like them than different. Just work it in. A little comment is all it takes to allay a lot of those safety concerns. At some point during the interview, you're going to want to ask, do you have any concerns at all with regard to safety, for example, just as an example, and let me address those for you. At which point you can say, I've worked previously without any injury. I manage my own home. I cook on an open stove. Whatever it is you think you need to say that lets them know you are safe. The second concern is always access to information. And Mariana, he may have been asking you if you can read, but he's probably really asking, how do you read without sight? Because he's closing his eyes, or she's closing her eyes and thinking, I can't see a thing. How am I supposed to read? You have to tell them, I read using Braille, or I use electronic media, speech output, Braille, large print. I have acquired all the same literacy skills that you have: reading, writing, mathematics, listening, speaking. I can share with you how it's accomplished. Ask me any questions that you have. The third concern employers have is transportation. They can't imagine getting anywhere without being in a car. You have to say, you don't have to, it's not legal. They can't require you to say, but you need to say, I get around in the environment easily. I ride buses, trains, I take Uber or Lyft, or I have a ride service that I use. Tell them so they don't have to sit there wondering, because if they don't understand, they will appear to be prejudicial. And then the fourth issue, the fourth concern for employers, pay attention because this one is a biggie, is about productivity. They can't imagine how you're going to do as much or as well as someone without good vision if they've never met or worked with somebody who's blind, who's competent. And so you need to be able to speak to the fact that when you were in school, secondary school or post-secondary school, depending on the case, that you kept up with your peers who were all sighted. You turned in your work on time. You made good grades, A's and B's for the most part, whatever it takes to let them know that you can compete with sighted people in the same amount of time and produce the same amount of work. Then all those concerns that have come across as prejudice will dissipate. It may not all go away, but they will dissipate.
Karen, thank you so much. And to Marina as well for your question. So we have 2 more questions there, but I'm just conscious of time. And we have Kirk Adams here, who's also to present. So if it's okay with you, Karen, would you be agreeable to hanging on for the next 15 minutes to receive those questions at the end?
Sure, it's no problem for me at all.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Sure.
Kirk, we're delighted to welcome you here today. How are you?
Well, I apologize for what I'm sure caused you to rearrange your schedule. I had a series of mishaps. I won't go into it, but here I am. I was so glad to be here. Thanks, Fiona.
We're delighted to welcome you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Kirk Adams is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the American Foundation for the Blind and is a longtime champion of people who are blind or visually impaired, and is committed to creating a more inclusive and accessible world for the more than 20 million Americans living with vision loss. So, Kirk, you're here to talk to us a bit today about interventions in the workplace, so definitely carrying on along the same theme. So I'm going to hand straight over to you without
Thank you. Thank you. And you have about 15 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, it was lovely to hear your voice, Karen. I caught the tail end of what you were saying, which is also true. I just say amen to everything I heard you say. I don't know what you said before that, so if I repeat, so be it. So again, my name is Kirk Adams. It's Dr. Kirk Adams. I have a PhD in leadership and change, which is newly acquired. I live in Seattle, Washington. I'm totally blind. My retina is detached. When I was in kindergarten, I went to a school for blind children in the state of Oregon for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, so ages 6 through 8. And I learned my blindness skills very solidly. So Braille, cane travel. Today it would be keyboarding, then it was typing on a typewriter, so that I could move into public school when I had my skills to the level where I could succeed. And I went on through public school, was always the only blind student in my schools. Graduated from college, degree in economics, Phi Beta Kappa, cum laude, lots of honors, and then I started applying for jobs. And I would send my cover letter and my resume, and I would get a phone interview, and then I would be asked to come in for the in-person interview, and I'd walk in with my white cane and my folder and my slate and stylus. And as Karen mentioned, that the employer across the desk could not imagine how I could do a job as a financial analyst. How would I get to work? How would I find the bathroom? They had no exposure to people who are blind. And in transportation and the employer attitudes always show up as number 1 or number 2 when surveys are put out about barriers to successful employment for people who are blind. And at AFB, we are a research organization, a public policy organization, a leadership development organization. We're in our 100th year, and there's lots of good stuff on our website. So I invite you to go to afb.org. And specifically, we've created some really, I think, excellent content this year for the centennial that you can find out at afb.org/100. So I was getting interviews, not getting hired. I then made the, if you have a visible disability like I do using a cane, at some point you need to choose when to disclose your disability, and I hadn't been disclosing it, so I started doing that. I started writing my cover letter. I'm totally blind. This is how I've achieved what I've achieved. This is the technology I use. These are the skills I have. Just like Karen was mentioning, I use Braille. I use refreshable Braille. I travel independently with a cane. All that stuff. And then I wasn't even getting the phone interviews. So I've had the real world of experience of being a blind job seeker who had great challenges in finding that first job. I later became an employer. I was the CEO of the Lighthouse for the Blind in Seattle, and we employed 250 people who were blind and deafblind in a variety of occupations, including aerospace machining. Now I'm at AFB. We've about 30% of our employees are blind. So I've been a blind job seeker, a blind employee, a blind employer. So, as we look at the employment situation for people who are blind compared to the general population, at least in the United States, every outcome, you could say it's half as good or twice as bad, however you want to look at it. So, only 30% or so, 35% of working age blind adults are in the workforce. That's about half of the general population. So workforce participation rate is 30% compared to 70%, somewhere in there. If you look at unemployment, and the unemployment rate is counting people who are actively out there looking for work and not finding it. So it's always twice as high for people who are blind. So if it's 4.5% for the general population, it'll be 9% for people who are blind. So those are blind people who are actively seeking work. And when we look at successful blind employment, how do blind adults thrive in employment? And it's all about thriving, and thriving means different things to different people, but we can generalize a couple things. So some things we look at starting way back when with blind children, if they are allowed to develop appropriately like their sighted brothers and sisters and neighbors, allowed to when they're 4 years old be on the playground and fall down and scrape the knee, early teen years be able to travel downtown and meet their friends, go to a movie, the things kids do. That's a great predictor of future success. And what that is tied to are expectations. So it's very important that there are high expectations held for blind kids, that you're expected to read at grade level, whether you're using Braille or magnification or audible means. If you're not able to read at speed with magnification, then I strongly advocate learning Braille. Parents, it's awesome when parents have high expectations. I did. My parents were teachers. They expected good grades. They expected us to turn out for sports. They expected us to be involved in school extracurriculars. But not every kid has that. So it's tough to ask a child to have high expectations of themselves. But to the extent that can be done, and I think it's easier these days than ever with technology, because you can find role models. You can find, if you're interested in chemistry, you can find a blind PhD in chemistry. If you're interested in archaeology, you can find a blind archaeologist. If you want to be an accountant, you can find a blind accountant. So I think intentionally finding those role models is very important. The next really big factor is tied to that. If you have high expectations of yourself and you are doing the things that people at your age do, and developmentally appropriate, then you're going to develop what's called a strong sense of an internal locus of control. So an internal locus of control is also a huge predictor of success as an adult, as opposed to an external locus of control. So all it means is, the internal locus means I believe I can shape my destiny. I believe I can create the life that I want. I believe that I can decide how I proceed. I can decide how I deal with circumstances. I can decide how I'm going to adapt to the bumps in the road. And an external locus is a feeling that there's nothing I can really do. So stuff is happening, it happens to me. You know, I'll just bear it. So interestingly, I did my dissertation, and I finished this 2 years ago. It was called Journeys Through Rough Country, an ethnographic study of blind adults successfully employed in large American corporations, which is a mouthful. But what I got to do is I got to interview a bunch of blind people who self-identified as being successful, who worked for big companies and were doing well, were thriving according to their own definition in employment. And one of the strongest themes that emerged was everyone had this really strong belief in their bones of that internal locus of control, that they could create their path. And almost all of them developed that early, most in the teen years, and mostly with some really impactful experience. And a lot of them were outdoor experiences, which I just thought was really, really interesting. Like a person went on a whitewater rafting trip. It was the first time they'd been away from home, the first time they'd really been able to take risks and not be coddled by their parents. Another young lady went to a summer camp with her sighted twin sister, and they snuck out to the horse arena, and they were doing horse jumping. Another person learned how to do freestyle bicycle tricks. Another person became a rock climber. So, you know, I don't know how generalizable that is, but the people I talked to all had these wonderful transformational experiences, and many of them were tied to the outdoors. So when I was at the School for the Blind as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, we did that. We went backpacking, we did horseback riding, we spent time at the seashore, you know, exploring tide pools. We built igloos out of snow. We learned how to, as blind kids, love our bodies and what they could do, and to feel comfortable moving through space. And I think there's room for a lot more research into that area, but it seems outdoor experiences and that locus of control and success are tied together. The last thing I'll say, well, I'll say 2 more things. Early work experience is a strong predictor. I was fortunate enough to have a job when I was 16. I was the sports editor for my high school paper, and the sports editor got to write a weekly newspaper column on high school sports for the town paper. So I kind of got that job by default. So I had a lot of things happen. I had parents who had high expectations of me. I learned blind. I was totally blind going into 1st grade, so I had to learn blindness skills. So I have very strong blindness skills. And then, you know, I had that early work experience, and I also had a lot of outdoor experiences and developed that sense of internal locus of control. But early work experience is a predictor, but I will just say that volunteer work and paid work are equally strong predictors of success. So if you are having challenges, as many young blind people do, finding paid work, volunteer work is just as vital. So I would suggest you pick something you're interested in. There's a group, there's an association for everything. So find, join, step up, volunteer to take on responsibilities, move into some leadership roles, run a committee, take on a project. That's good on the resume, and it's good for the locus of control, and it's good for your expectations of yourself. And the last thing I'll say is just a mindset about blindness and a strengths mindset. So if you read a book, for instance, like The Talent Code, it talks about very accomplished people and how they became that way. And it's really through challenges and figuring out how to overcome challenges. So tasks that are not so easy that you're not challenged, and tasks that are not so challenging that you become overwhelmed and give up. So it's the brain develops based on your experiences. So taking on challenges and learning how to overcome them develops capacities in the brain around things like creative problem solving, resilience, grit, how to analyze and manage risks, how to work with teams of people, how to communicate, how to listen. And those are all the characteristics that employers say they want. So if you ask an employer what they want, they'll say, I want someone who solves problems, doesn't create problems. I want someone who's a creative problem solver. I want someone who's innovative. I want someone who knows how to look at a situation and analyze and manage the risk. I want someone who can work with a diverse team of people. I want someone who can listen. I want someone who can communicate. And living every day as a blind person, we have really unique opportunities to develop these skills at a level that many other people don't. And I'll close with just a little example. I had all my textbooks in Braille through high school. And then when I went to college, I wasn't getting Braille anymore. The professors would put their book list together right before the semester. I was getting some books from Recording for the Blind recorded on tape. And I was also needing to use readers. So I had a budget from my Commission for the Blind here in Washington State that I could use to hire readers at minimum wage. So I was 18 and I was interviewing people. I was hiring people. I had to fire a few people. I was billing. I was invoicing. I was paying people. So that's just a little example. My classmates were not doing that. They were not having those experiences at that age. So I just encourage you to think about blindness in the light of a developer of strengths. And that is certainly the concept that at AFB we are scaling in the employer community. We're talking to employers and pointing that out, that if they want employees with all the characteristics they're talking about, there's a group of people who are underemployed who have those characteristics. So we're working to close that gap. I welcome any of you to get in touch with me. My email address is my first initial K, my last name Adams, so KADAMS @afb.org. And please do go to the website afb.org and afb.org/100 for the awesome centennial content. And thanks so much for having me. And again, I apologize for not being on time. I hate that. Blind people are always on time. I fell down on my job.
Thank you so much, Kirk. That was a really, really great and very inspiring talk. And you made it very, very easy for me to now advertise our Retina International Youth Council once more, in it being a voluntary position and can go towards your personal and career development. So once again, please do get in touch if you'd like to join. And a huge thank you to Kirk. So we are over time, but I do see that we have a few questions. So if our panelists are amenable to staying on to take those questions, but please know that the event has now concluded officially, so you may leave if you wish.
It's 5:30 in the morning, Fiona. I don't have anything else to do, so I'm here as long as you need me.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Kirk and thank you to Karen for staying on. And I see Doug is still here as well. So I'll come to Marina Sutter first, who had messaged me with a question. Marina, if you'd like to unmute.
So I just want to say thank you. What an amazing message to share. It's so full of hope and so full of power, and that idea of that internal locus of control, it just vibes with me. So the question that I have for, actually, I think everyone could answer this question. So we can see through research that having a mentor is very powerful. It can help direct and predict success for people. So my question is, if you were to, say, have a job and you were new, would it be better to have a mentor inside the workplace or external? So like a long-term mentor versus a short-term in the job mentor.
It's Karen.
Go ahead, Karen. Sorry.
I was just going to say that I think why choose between? I would have both. I think it's always to your advantage to have more people rather than fewer people on your team. And I think that it's an indicator of one's ability to communicate and negotiate and direct your own future, to pick people that you think will work well with you for the future. So I would have both. If I could only have one, I suppose that I would choose that one within the company as a priority, simply because that person would know the ins and outs of that particular company. But I think both is the answer that I would stick with, frankly. Kirk, did you want to add?
Yeah, I would say about mentors. Now, formal mentoring programs, you sign up to be a mentee, you get assigned a mentor. Sometimes it's great, often it's not. So I think what you're looking for are relationships. And what I would say is find someone who has an affinity with you, whether they're internal or external, and the more you have, the merrier, as Karen said. So it's Marina?
Yes.
So Marina, what are you interested in? Do you have thoughts for your
So
area?
right now I'm in the process of starting my master's. My goal is to do a PhD in health sciences. I do not know exactly where, but my interest also lies within promotion, holistic health promotion and such.
So what I would do is I would use the awesome tools you have at your disposal with search engines and the network you have with the Retina Foundation, and I would find blind people who are successfully thriving in the health sciences, and I would reach out to them. Blind people.
Only blind people? Because my experience is I have a huge plethora of mentors at my disposal. I have aunties and just a lot of female figures, and I wonder, none of them have visual impairment, but I've found them to be useful touchstones. So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you don't have blind mentors, I think I would place a priority on that. I think it'll be very helpful as you navigate through the world. But if I were a successful blind executive in a health sciences company, or a successful blind professor in the health sciences program, and Marina reached out to me and said, I'm pursuing my master's and I want to get a PhD in health sciences, and I'd love a chance to talk to you for half an hour and get your experiences, 99.99% of those people are going to be thrilled that you reached out to them and asked them to share, because they want to share, they want to pay forward, they want to help people. So that's what I would do.
Yeah, and Marina, it's Karen. I would just add that you can go to Project Aspiro and some of these other sites that I mentioned, including YouTube, and find blind and low vision people, but you want both. You want those people from your own network who are supporting you already and who are, as you said, touchstones, and add to them, as Kirk said, some information from the blindness community, because that will serve you well moving forward.
So much. Thank you to Marina, thank you to Karen and Kirk. So I have two more questions here and then we will wrap up because I am conscious we're over time. So I see Tahir Ali. Tahir, you're invited to unmute. Hello?
Hello, you hear
Hi,
me?
we do.
Thank you, Fiona, for having me. I won't take much time. I know it's out of time already, but I have a small question I want to ask that as you know that COVID hits really hard globally. So what I just want to ask from Ms. Karen and Kirk that what are the new opportunities emerging for visually impaired in this COVID crisis, and what are your thoughts and how the country, your country, and what kind of new careers are emerging for visually impaired?
Oh, this is Kirk. So first of all, there's a silver lining for blind employment because remote work and virtual work is becoming a norm, and everybody's doing it, and it's not unusual now, and the tools are much better, and there's more accessible tools. So I was talking. One of our board members is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Hewlett Packard, and I had lunch with him yesterday here in Seattle, and he was saying that only about 11% of Hewlett Packard employees are going into the office now. And they're just shifting, they're shedding their buildings, they're selling their buildings, everyone's working remotely. And we talked about careers, and he said one of the hardest jobs they consistently have been filling is HR recruiters. So becoming a recruiter seems like a very viable career path. In the States, there's a nonprofit called the Sourcing Institute that trains blind people and certifies them to be HR recruiters. Cybersecurity is another huge area. If you look at Indeed.com, there's always 27,000, 30,000 cybersecurity jobs. So that's really emerging. Internal help desk, he also talked about, and Starbucks is based here. And I talked with them, and they also said HR recruiters and internal help desk people. So if you're running a Starbucks store and you have a question, you need to call somebody. So that's an example of an internal help desk. I know Cisco Systems has hired a lot of people for internal help desk. So those are three ideas: the internal help desk jobs, the cybersecurity jobs, and then the HR recruiting. But obviously not confined to those things. The good news is that employers now are not surprised when someone wants to work remotely or virtually. It's become the norm, so that helps blind people overcome things like transportation barriers.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, would you like me to just say a quick word here, if you don't mind? It's Karen. I would agree with everything that Kirk has said. I would add just two quick things. One is that the World Blind Union, with whom I work, has just completed an employment survey, international. 2,500 people responded. 62% of them were blind and visually impaired. So if any of you are interested in all those details, I'd be happy to share those with you offline. And then last but not least, I would just remind everyone that the most important thing Kirk shared with you is that these virtual work environments are much, much more accessible and open to blind and visually impaired people who have the technology skills. So make sure you have those good technology skills no matter what career, so that you can work remotely.
Thank you, Karen. And our very, very last minute will come to Melissa. How are you, Melissa?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm Melissa from Switzerland, and my current struggle is coming to a realization that as a blind woman, I learn very differently than everyone around me who's sighted. So my approach to gaining resources is more that I specialize in order to get an overview, and everyone around me gets an overview in order to specialize.
Mm-hmm.
So often I feel like I'm going against the grain in my approach to gaining information and learning my craft. So I was wondering if there was any advice into kind of come towards this kind of issue that I've found.
What is your craft, Melissa?
I'm a software engineer aspiring to be.
Mm-hmm. I don't know the specifics. The only very general, I think there's a growing awareness that people have different learning styles. I think if you're in some sort of formal training program, a classroom program, I think having the conversation with whoever's leading that program is totally legit. Before I entered my PhD program, I talked to the head of the program and let them know these are the things I'm going to need in order to be successful here. And they're very open to all of that. I would also say that the fact of the matter is that just like kids, the expanded core curriculum, blind kids need to learn everything sighted kids do and 9 more things. And so it takes more time. You have to work harder. That's just the fact of the matter. So, I don't know your specifics, but getting materials ahead of time in the proper format that you need, advocating for that. I didn't talk about self-advocacy skills. Mine were terrible until I was 30 years old. So learning how to advocate for what you need to make sure you have the materials on a timely basis in advance in your preferred format, I think helps a lot. I don't know if that was helpful, but I'd be happy to talk to you more. So feel free to email me if you'd like.
Oh, that's awesome.
Melissa, let me add very quickly, it's Karen, that I don't think it's as important the style you use as it is the outcome. So if your research approach works for you and you can get the job accomplished, that's what matters. And I think that the only thing to be cautious about is that comparative analyses that I think you need to do at some point with your work approach and your outcomes versus the work approach and the outcomes of your peers. If you see that there's a radical difference in the outputs, what you're getting versus what they're getting from your approach, then you need to come back in and analyze it again to see which is working better and why. What are the differences? And it's not just the approach, it's probably a lot of underlying issues that you need to analyze. So again, it's not the approach, it's the outcome. Do you achieve what you need to achieve? If you do, keep track of that over time so that if someone comes back to you and says, but you use such a different approach, it won't work for us, then you need to be able to give specific evidence of how your approach has achieved the same exact outcomes for you as the approach other people are using that's achieved for them. Make sense?
Yeah, that's a great point to make. I'll definitely take that with me.
Good.
Karen and Kirk, thank you so much for your insight. And there's really rich discussions to be had here on the topic of careers, which we will be facilitating tomorrow at our personal interest discussion rooms as well. So there'll be a really great opportunity for some peer discussions there. Thank you all so much for your generosity of time. I know we're over time, but there's just too many good questions to leave behind. So a special thank you to our presenters for this session, to Karen, to Kirk, and to Doug as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And that brings us to a close of day 1 of our Retina International Youth Conference. Please make sure to join us again at the same time tomorrow, which is 12 CET. That's 11 a.m. Irish time, and what is it, like very, very early EST. I think we're 5 a.m. EST, I think. So without further ado, I'm happy to close the session. Just a reminder to please participate in our social media call to action. I can share the slide here again. So to share with us what gives you hope. a photo of you with something written down of what gives you hope for the future. So this is to celebrate International Youth Day. So you can use our hashtag International Youth Day, hashtag ORIYC 2021, hashtag Eye on the Future. And if you tag us, retina_int, on that, we'll be sure to share and create a lovely collage at the end. So we're looking forward to all the things that you share with us. And that brings us to a close. Thank you all. I really look forward to our program tomorrow, where we'll have the personal interest discussion rooms. And then our final session will be on research and innovation, which will be a really great session as well.